Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today. This session will be recorded. Today, we're going to be exploring HashiCorp's Terraform and Prisma Cloud by Palo Alto, and combining it for a better together solution. We're going to start today with a panel discussion, followed by a demo, and then we are going to be closing the session with a Q&A. So if you do have any questions or anything like that, please do put them in the Q&A section, and I'll ask that to the speakers towards the end. I would also like to thank all of the speakers today that are going to be joining us. So without further ado, I think let's get it all kicked off. So, I mean, if you could each briefly introduce yourselves and your background. Dylan, you're on my screen, so we might as well start with you.
Sounds good. Hi, everybody. Excuse me. Good morning, good afternoon, I think, to most of the folks on the other side of the pond. My name is Dylan Doxey. I am a senior partner solutions engineer here at HashiCorp. So I work very closely with our friends over at Palo Alto regarding our Prisma Cloud integrations. I have a couple of other strategic partners as well that I work with. Prior to being here at HashiCorp, I was at VMware for 10 years. I'm a VCDX in NSX. So big infrastructure, virtualization, and networking guy. Very excited to be here to talk to you all today about our integration with Prisma Cloud. Jack, you want to go next?
Yeah, happy to. Well, thanks for having me on. My name is Jack Butler. Sit within the office of the field CTO over here at HashiCorp, and Dylan and I have really spent the last year and change working with a number of our top customers, as well as top prospects, figuring out how do we bridge the gap between security and platform as more and more companies move to the public cloud. So excited to talk to you all a little bit about some of the problems that we've seen in the market and how we can help you all out. Dina?
Yep, good afternoon, everyone, and many thanks for that. So, Dino Pachano, and I'm a partner business manager at Palo Alto Networks. I'm responsible for the Prisma Cloud partner ecosystem within the UK. Looking forward to spending some time with you guys today and just providing you with an overview of what we see in the market, a bit of a high-level overview of Prisma Cloud, but most importantly, how Prisma Cloud and HashiCorp enable you to help your customers deliver a secure developer velocity. Thank you.
And it's me, Goran Bogovic, Prisma Cloud Solutions Architect. Happy to be part of this discussion and happy to present it with our friends from Nowhere and HashiCorp. I've been with Palo Alto for more than 11 years now, last 3 years covering Prisma Cloud specifically. And in my role, I'm helping our partners with pre-sales technical enablement sessions and also handling end customer requests when it comes to Prisma Cloud. In terms of background, more than 20 years in industry, started as a networking, but then slowly transitioned to security and cloud as well. Thank you.
Perfect. And to finish it all off, I'm Kurt Martinezson. So I am the solutions leader here at Newaware. I work with our partners, our vendors, to really kind of push out campaigns around solution benefits pieces like the one we're going to be speaking about today. So yeah, really interested to get into it. I think the best way to start this out would probably be to talk about your individual platforms first, before we get into the integrations piece. So, Jack, do you maybe want to kick that off and tell us a little bit about Terraform?
Yeah, happy to. So I think it's important to understand kind of where HashiCorp started from to understand our tooling a little bit. So with Terraform in particular, Armand Dagger and Mitchell Hashimoto, our two founders, were students in college that had been given test instances of Azure, AWS, and other compute. And what they were trying to figure out for their computer science lab is how do they consistently provision two different resource pools that they were given, right? They didn't really have a choice. They couldn't go out and buy new hardware if they wanted. They really need to make the most of what they had. So that was back in 2012. And with Terraform really starting as an open source project, only recently became a commercial product. And what we found with our customers that were taking Terraform to scale, now that it's been downloaded hundreds of millions of times, is that really enforcing security policy, compliance, and having control across a team is why someone needs to go from an individual user command line open source Terraform to a commercial platform of Terraform. So really what we're talking about today with Prisma Cloud and shifting left is exactly why customers move from open source to commercial. And I'm excited to tell you a little bit more about what that's meant to our customers over the past 6 years of code development with Prisma Cloud.
Dino, and then obviously over to the Prisma Cloud piece, a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks for that. And before I do, I just want to set a bit of context in terms of what we see happening out there in the market. Majority of customers are using public cloud now as their main underlying platform to drive transformation within their organizations. And what we see them doing is that majority of them, over 75% of them releasing new code on a weekly basis, but about 38% of these releasing new code every day. And we all know that application is the key thing that differentiates the offering for our customers. Gen I is being widely adopted, which is also accelerating these trends. So we just see that innovation just escalating. From a risk perspective, customers are, they're leveraging custom open source and infrastructure as code to develop these new applications, with 80% of this open source packages containing the vulnerability. And on those vulnerabilities, adversaries are actually able to exploit them much quicker than ever. And the velocity of the cloud applications being developed is actually outpacing the speed at which security teams can actually secure them. So we have this big challenge here, right? Customers want to drive innovation, but they're challenged with how they do this securely. And the application is at the heart of all this innovation. And that's further impacted and compounded by the ratio of security professionals to developers. Typically about 10 to 1, but we see extreme cases around 100 and plus more to 1 than most organizations. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do about this? How do we help customers here? Because what we see is typically vulnerabilities that are in open source or within custom code or at the infrastructure at code level when they're building out the applications. By the time they get into the infrastructure and into the cloud runtime, that's multiplied by the thousands. So they're forever chasing their tail. And this is where Prisma Cloud comes in. And Prisma Cloud is part of Palo Alto Networks. We have 3 distinct business units within Palo Alto. So network security, people might know us around the Prisma SASE side. We have the security operations piece around the Cortex piece. But most importantly for today, we're talking around Prisma Cloud, which is all around protection for the code and applications in the cloud. And we call this our code to cloud platform. And we break this down into 3 chunks. One of which is around we call it shift left. Hashi colleagues mentioned it earlier. And that's all around securing the source and risk prevention. And that's pretty much where we enable organizations to embed security within that early on, shifting left within that software development lifecycle that we're going to talk around today. Another part of it is around securing the infrastructure, providing the visibility and control. So enabling organizations to understand what they've got out there, what vulnerabilities they have, what it means to them, both around cloud, data, and AI. And then the other piece is around securing the runtime. And securing the runtime is, enabling organizations to detect and defend and block against those vulnerabilities in runtime in real time. So that's pretty much a high level around Prisma Cloud. Today we're going to talk around the integration with HashiCorp, and we have Goran from the senior SE over at Prisma Cloud. He's going to provide a bit more of a demo around that later on in the presentation.
Yeah, definitely. Dylan, on the Terraform side, is there anything that you would like to add there before we talk about the integration piece?
Yeah, so it's an interesting conversation as I, kind of joined this team and started to really work with Prisma Cloud. The way that I approach Terraform and bringing it to a customer or talking with a CISO or, technical decision makers has changed pretty drastically. And I was a practitioner, right? Before I came over here to HashiCorp, I was a user of open source Terraform. I loved it. It helped me out in my previous roles quite a bit. But now I almost view open source Terraform as kind of a risk, right? Like the folks that are using open source Terraform are almost kind of cowboys in a way, because Terraform is fantastic. It allows us to provision infrastructure really, really fast, right? And it's very, very repeatable. And we know that what we're deploying is going to come out the same every time. But one of the issues that we can have is that what we're deploying from the modules, right? If there's a bad configuration there, that can almost kind of be like a seed, right, for bad infrastructure, where a single bad module can be reused over and over and over by development teams and ultimately creates infrastructure that is non-compliant and non-secure. Jack alluded to this a little bit before, but we have actually 3 different flavors of Terraform. There is the open source version that a lot of folks get started on. We have a customer hosted commercial offering called Terraform Enterprise, and then we have a SaaS version, which is called HCP Terraform. We're going to talk a lot more here and as we go through the demo and kind of like the technicals and what's under the hood. But really, what I'm hoping everyone can gain from this conversation today around Terraform, if you have a baseline understanding of what Terraform does, provisioning infrastructure, that's great. I'm not necessarily here to tell you all about HCP Terraform, but really what I want to show you is how powerful of a security tool Terraform can really be when we combine it with Prisma, and how the conversation shifts when we're sitting down with technical decision makers, particularly those on the security side, when these 2 products or these 2 solutions come together.
So you mentioned there about taking a look under the hood. I think that's exactly what I would like to get into. Not the engine pieces, but let's show me where the turbo is, right?
Yeah.
So could you explain in a little bit more detail around how the integration between Terraform and Prisma Cloud actually works?
Absolutely. So Prisma Cloud is they have over 3,000 out of the box policies that are based on a language called Chekhov. So all of these policies have been pre-written, they're community supported, tested, and all that kind of good stuff. And many of them are built around popular compliance frameworks, things like GDPR, very applicable to the folks on the other side of the pond from me. Sarbanes-Oxley, HIPAA, PCI, you name it, there's probably a compliance standard that they have policies for. So as we're deploying infrastructure inside of Terraform, there is something called a run task. And a run task is, and I'll show a slide about this before our demo that will kind of help piece things together. But essentially what it is as Terraform is deploying infrastructure, we have stops along the path of deployment where we can make decisions or send information to another third party and get a response back. And we use this run task when we're deploying infrastructure in Terraform to send all of the changes. So any resources we're going to create, any resources that are going to be changed or deleted, and all of the details regarding those resources get shipped over to Prisma. And then Prisma will actually scan that plan data and return a response back to Terraform that says, hey, you have an S3 bucket that's publicly searchable on the internet. You have an EBS volume that is unencrypted, and it will actually stop our Terraform run if that's the desired behavior, or we can just send informational messages to our developers to say, hey, the infrastructure that you're deploying, needs to be encrypted, it needs to be secure, it needs to have X, Y, and Z inside of it. And it really shifts security left. What do we mean by shifting security left? Previously, I mentioned before, I was a VMware guy. I would always sit down with my application teams. They'd be building something really cool at one of my customer sites. They'd go through the development processes. They'd maybe promote it to testing. Okay, great. This application's looking fantastic. We're ready to move it into production. And when we're ready to move it into production, that's typically when security gets involved, right? We're asking for things like, ports to be opened on a firewall, a certificate, or something like that. And then security starts to dig in a little bit more. And when they do, they can put up blockers to our application teams. Maybe our application team designed something in a way that simply won't work with our company, right? With our security standards. Wouldn't it be great if security was involved before we did all of this work and got to the point where we're ready to ask for ports and certificates and stuff? That's really what this solution is meant to do. We take the feedback from the security teams and we make it available to the developer while they're writing their code directly in the IDE, even. I'll show that in our demo later. But through these run tasks, we are enforcing compliant infrastructure because Terraform will actually stop the run if something is not configured properly.
I mean, you've probably touched on there a little bit around some of the kind of the challenges or pain points but is there any others that you feel are noteworthy, right, for this audience around the integration addressing for the security teams, for the developers, for the DevOps teams that you would want to add to that?
Yeah, and Jack, actually, maybe you want to take this one because you tell this story a little bit better than me. But we've had a customer that had dedicated resources to building out policy as code modules. And Jack, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think for when you like really break this down, it's all about people and time, right? Is that's where people feel this, right? So with unlimited resources, ideally every business could write all of their own custom policy for every single workload that they have for all of their infrastructure. But what we find when we go into customers is that they're really trying to balance out speed, cost, and risk is really what it comes down to. So how quickly can I deploy, right? So some of the metrics that Dino mentioned before, and for the people that are more security focused on this call, this might be like your stress metric. But our customers are really pushing the envelope when it comes to how many developers, right, code committers, if you will, can be supported by a single Terraform expert, right? So we have customers over in the Netherlands that have hundreds of developers that are supported by single platform engineers, right? And that they're really pushing the envelope when it comes from flipping over from that weekly code commits of those developers to daily code commits, even in some cases, multiple code commits per day. So a lot of businesses are over indexing on speed, but what happens there is you either have bloat, right? From a cost perspective, you have infrastructure that gets abandoned and not managed, and the meter is running. If your systems aren't set to shut things down when they don't need to be, or you take on risk, right? So a poorly written module, right, that has an EC2 instance that's available to the public internet, that only introduces risk to a business. So what we find is that because the talent is the number one constraint that all of our customers continue to tell us that they have, is that they don't have enough people, is that you see businesses over indexing one way or another. Either they over index on speed and they're willing to, and they start to take on risk or increase costs, or, right, they over index on compliance and then their teams can't commit any code because they're breaking and fixing things and chasing things down manually. So I think the challenge here really is like never having enough people to actually bridge that gap between security and platform.
Yeah, I just want to add just on that piece you mentioned around the dev guys in terms of what we see is a scarcity in the industry, and once organizations have them, they want to retain them, and we see Prisma Cloud, delivering that kind of frictionless experience for the developers, integrating security upfront and avoiding those unnecessary challenges that they encounter with security teams holding them back. So it actually improves that developer retention within organizations as well. So we're looking at some of that data, which is quite interesting, where they have Prisma Cloud in terms of retaining the personnel and the developers that they have within a business as well.
Not perfect. Cheers. Thanks, Dino. So I think under the implementation piece, because obviously we're working with multiple vendors and things like that. Dylan, this might be one maybe more for you, but is configuring the integration between Prisma and Terraform, is it quite complex?
So anecdotally, one of our folks here at HashiCorp left recently, who actually owned our Prisma Cloud tenant. And when he left, all of my configurations got blown up. I started off with a fresh instance. So I was rebuilding our demo for this recently, and it took me all of 7 minutes. I timed
Oh,
it.
wow.
Yep, from
Yeah.
the time, and now I know what I'm doing, right? I've done this a couple times, but 7 minutes, if you know what you're doing, from the time you start clicking through the Terraform UI until you are deploying infrastructure that is being scanned by Prisma Cloud.
Okay. So
And I think
heavy
Kurt,
duty, that's what I would say.
yeah, very
it
heavy
is.
duty. Yeah.
Yep,
And so
definitely.
we actually run this as a workshop monthly. So AWS sponsors a joint hands-on workshop between HashiCorp and Palo Alto Networks to run this. So we put hundreds of people per month, Kurt, through this workshop hands-on. So over 1,000 people sign up. It's been AWS's most successful hands-on lab for about 2 years running. And we play the same movie every single month, Dylan and I, and a couple of our peers over there, and hundreds of people come through, some with no Terraform experience, some with no Prisma Cloud experience, and they're able to stand this up. And what we've actually seen, Kurt, is that when we look at our security integrations for Terraform, Prisma Cloud has 10x. Like, I just want to say that one more time, 10x the adoption of its next closest competitor. And in my opinion, it's because it's so easy and so accessible.
So since you're speaking already, Jack, I think one thing that I would maybe be interested in is, and this might come back to what you were speaking about before, but how will this solution affect a customer's existing security and development workflow?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question that has in part like two answers to it. So what Dylan and I have seen over the past year or so is that it's a different journey if you're coming to this from a security perspective first, or if you're coming to it from a platform perspective first. So for the security teams, we were working with a large financial in the Northeast of the United States. So bridging insurances, banking, investments. So they had a complicated portfolio of subsidiaries, if you will, that they were trying to effectively enforce a single policy set everywhere. So the deputy CISO that we were working with on this project was saying, I want one set of policies everywhere all the time, no matter what, and I want no one to be able to break it. So from a security first perspective, what we're talking about with that customer is essentially getting their developers out of command line and into platform for enforcement. And so whether it was this large financial or healthcare companies that Dylan and I have talked to, or manufacturers, what security is then offering by bringing in something like Terraform to their Prisma estate is twofold. Is for the security operators, you have a one-to-many impact on how many tickets and alerts you're reducing. So for every policy that you enforce through Terraform, it's hundreds of individual runtime risks that you're removing from the right side of your security approach. But what you're offering your developers back is productivity. So those individual developers, the cowboys that Dylan mentioned before, they're not able to share modules or workflows effectively so that they can cross collaborate to their development. They're effectively re-downloading or rebuilding their workflows per user. So what security is able to offer is kind of like uh, the reward for coming onto the platform is actually boosting efficiency between those developers. So as security practitioners, you're not just all breaks on those developers, you're actually offering them a way to actually go faster, but also go safer by bringing them into a unified platform. So that's the security first standpoint. For the teams that are speed first, often the ones that actually start with Terraform, and we're actually bringing in Prisma to those conversations, it's a little bit different. So for an energy and utility provider in the Southeast of the United States, they had made a 3-year commit with AWS about moving a bunch of legacy on-prem, sorry, Dylan, VMware kit to the public cloud. And AWS and HashiCorp had to have a very awkward early renewal conversation for the sellers on the phone. We were 12 months into a contract, and we already had to renew that 3-year commit. So a little bit awkward to go back and say, hey, your scoping was horrible. And what we found on the AWS side is that they had 6x the deployment that they expected, right? Unbelievably fast, way ahead of the curve. And for those folks that do work in the energy and utility sector, that's not very much expected there. So what we had to do then is we had to look back and almost audit and say, hey, you've spent all your Terraform skill set on writing modules, you've gone fast, you're ahead of the curve there. But they had a choice. They had a 32-person platform team. They were looking at allocating 10 to 12 of those folks to just writing security policies to kind of clean up the mess that they'd already built. Or instead of spending effectively millions of dollars of talented headcount on solving that problem, they actually just paid for Prisma. Because to them, it was really just like a FTE offset. And what they found is that not only did they save 8 full-time employees in year 1, but they actually they only had to hire 1 cloud security professional to stay safe going forward. So that was like a CTO platform level team that was actually bringing in security out of choice so that they could continue on their roadmap of migrating everything that they had to the public cloud. So what we see is that in a certain sense, you can get both, you can reduce your risk as well as increase your speed, regardless of which direction you're taking that conversation, whether you're platform CTO first or your CISO security first.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I think so. Kind of going back to you, Dylan, based on what we've just heard from Jack, is there any kind of best practices or recommendations that you would kind of put in place if I was to implement this?
Yeah. So when we're implementing any policy as code, it can be a little, I don't want to say scary, but folks can be apprehensive about it, right? Because we're bringing in potentially hundreds of policies that weren't there before. And one of the first questions I get asked is, what's this going to do to production? Are we going to slow ourselves down? And the point there is no, to be honest. When we're doing policy enforcement, I had mentioned this before, there's multiple different levels that we can have during a run. So when we first start off, if we're still concerned about speed, but we just kind of want to start to inform our developers, kind of get folks on board into this new workflow and so they can start to see the messages come through as they're deploying infrastructure, we can set this up in what's called an advisory mode. And essentially during the run, if there is something that is non-compliant, we can just send information back to the developers, for the next time. Hey, make sure this EBS volume is encrypted, right? So maybe, I've had customers that run this maybe for like a month or two, in this kind of advisory mode so that the developers can just get feedback and start to make those changes as they need to. From there, we can move into a soft or a hard mandatory where it essentially requires someone to either come in and click a button and say, I know this EBS volume is unencrypted, but it's okay, just send it anyway, or just to fail the run entirely, right? So it's really easy for us to get going there, and we have a lot of flexibility in how those deployments can work.
One analogy that kind of, as you were speaking, the kind of analogy that I've seen and heard from before, especially working in the shift left environment, is when you're looking at Prisma Cloud, especially towards the end of that run, you'd be looking at a plane in flight, right?
Mhm.
That's exactly what it is. It is a plane in flight and it's already flying. But what we're doing is we're sending data to the ground crew still building planes.
Yes.
So the next plane that leaves is a lot better. I think that's I've heard that one before. I don't know if it might have been you that actually said that to me, and that really helped me understand it a little bit more from like an analogy point of view.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best thing is to kind of just show them,
Yeah,
right? So yeah, I think I'm done talking really. Goran, I think the best thing and the way that we're going to do this is I think we'll start with you, Goran. We'll take a look at the Prisma Cloud piece. We'll then Dylan, I'll pass over to you and we'll look at Terraform. And then obviously at the end of that Terraform piece, can you also then showcase how it would look together?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Goran, if you want to share your screen. Oh, sorry.
Yes, sounds good. So I'm going to share my screen. So please, if you can just confirm that you see slide deck.
Yes, I'm looking at a risk prevention deck.
Great. Yeah, before I jump into the demo itself, I always like to kind of do 2-3 slides just to explain what we are doing here and maybe a little bit step back. So just for better understanding, like one picture says is better than thousands of words. So here what you see is typical application life cycle of cloud native application, but the same life cycle is applicable to infrastructure as a code. And majority of our customers obviously are using Terraform as infrastructure as a code.
Goran, I just want to stop you for a second. Do you want to just move it into slideshow so it's a lot bigger on screen? I didn't mean to stop your flow
That is
there.
a good, yep.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that'll look a lot better.
Thank you for this one. So basically what I'm showing are typical application life cycle, and the same life cycle is applicable to infrastructure as a code framework. And we are talking about Terraform because this is mostly used framework. So some typical security problems around those life cycles are depicted here, and I will not talk a lot about them. Specifically, I'm going to talk about infrastructure as a code misconfiguration. Why this is so important? Because one issue introduced as a problem inside infrastructure as a code, usually you are going to create one template using this infrastructure as a code, let's say Terraform, and then you're going to create resource in runtime. Out of one template, you can create hundreds of those resources, which can cause hundreds or thousands of different alerts or misconfigurations in runtime later. So what is exactly Prisma Cloud? Dino mentioned this is a cloud security platform that provides different features, but mainly we are going to talk today around risk prevention or application security, and even more specifically, infrastructure as a code security. This is just one or another way to represent this problem that I already described. So developers are writing some code. In this case, we are going to talk about DevOps people that are writing infrastructure as a code templates. And if this one misconfiguration introduced in early phase of life cycle is made here, later in runtime, SOC people or security people will have hundreds, if not thousands, of security alerts. And this story about fixing problems in runtime, it is roughly 20 times more expensive than fixing them during the creation or in the early phase of application lifecycle. So that's it about slides. Just this is what I'm going to demonstrate. We talked here a lot. The best way to fix those issues are as close as possible to developer or DevOps people. So the closest place is obviously integration with IDE. So IDE can be VS Code, IntelliJ, or anything else that developers or DevOps people are using. The next stop or place where you can do it is version control systems, so integrations with GitHub, GitLab, or similar version control systems where we are enforcing those policies that we already mentioned. And this is not necessarily hard enforcement, and I think Dylan mentioned this. So we don't need to stop anything, but we can just provide advice. So it's up to DevOps people or DevSecOps people or even security if they are going to enforce it or just alert it. And finally, which is also interest of today's session, is integration inside some CI/CD pipeline. And later, I believe Dylan is going to demonstrate how we can integrate in this part here with Terraform Cloud or Terraform Enterprise, where we can enforce some security measurements during the pipeline and even fail the pipeline if there are specific critical violations. So let me just go to my console, but before I show Prisma Cloud, let me show you GitHub repository that I'm going to use for this demo. So what you see here is very simple Terraform code for creation of S3 bucket, which is a storage resource in AWS. And here also in my repository, I have one very simple workflow, and I'm using GitHub Actions for the workflow. And the idea behind this workflow is to do scanning during the CI/CD pipeline. Later, during the demonstration that Dylan is going to provide, instead of this GitHub action, probably we'll have some integration between Prisma Cloud and Terraform Cloud or Terraform Enterprise. So the idea in my lab is to scan the code during the CI/CD pipeline. So I want to do first scan at the integration with IDE, then a version control system, and finally CI/CD pipeline. So let's open Visual Studio Code, which I'm using here for the demo. And the same code that I showed you in GitHub repository is now cloned inside my machine. So I have this S3 bucket and configuration, which is very simple. How does it work? So basically, what I have here is a special plugin called the Checkov, and I think Dylan mentioned this because all policies, out-of-the-box policies or custom policies, so those things that we are using to check configuration of the Terraform resources are coming from Checkov. And as soon as I open this file, you can see this red line, which is kind of grammar check. And this is basically Checkov is scanning my code and immediately gives me some idea of what can be wrong with my S3 bucket. It can be, for example, encryption is not enabled, or more specifically for this specific resource, cross-region replication is disabled, and so on. You can see 7 different findings. So those are coming from these policies, 3,000 and more policies that we are providing out of the box. Okay, so this is a first place where developer can enforce some policies and say, I want to change or add some additional code that will fix some misconfigurations. But let's imagine that I don't want to enforce it here. So the next place to enforce code is obviously when I push this code to version control system. In my case, this is GitHub. So how usually it works? Usually developers would create a new branch in order to push this code. So I can give it the name Hashi. So this is a branch. Now inside this branch, I would add some code. And this is just simple. I will add another S3 bucket. So I'm happy with my code. Saving the file and as you can see, immediately Chekhov scanning this code and found now 7 more additional problems because we have 2 buckets. I'm happy with the code. I'm committing this code to the repo and publishing this branch. Okay, so far so good. I will transition to GitHub repository. So if I go to the home page of this GitHub repository, I can see that the code my developer, in this case it's me, pushed. It will show up here inside repository, and this is just GitHub feature. I can see what was pushed, see that additional Terraform resource was added. I'm happy with this change, so I want to create pull request or to merge this branch into my main branch. So what happens now is basically second place, if you remember from this slide, where we are scanning. So first integration was with IDE. I ignored those recommendations that Prisma Cloud provided, and I'm pushing a code into GitHub repository. But because we have integration with GitHub, similarly as we have with Terraform Cloud and Terraform Enterprise, we can scan this code. And as you can see it here, Prisma Cloud is scanning the code. We are expecting the same findings, so those 14 different misconfigurations. So let's give it a few more seconds, and it will show up here. Okay, maybe just quick refresh. Still working. Okay, while this is working, what I can show you as a next step is how it looks like on Prisma Cloud. So what I'm showing now is Prisma Cloud console specific view. And this is more specifically application security. I selected this repository that we are scanning because we made integration between GitHub repository and Prisma Cloud. And Prisma Cloud scanned repository and found all those misconfigurations in Terraform that we introduced initially. As you can see, those different 7 problems are here. So I can find one of them was encryption was missing. So if I click here, it will show me what was the missing and what is the code to fix the problem. And even I can fix the problem directly from Prisma Cloud, which means that Prisma Cloud is going to go back to the GitHub and the change configuration with adding those encryption pieces of configuration. So let's go back now to Prisma Cloud. Okay, it's still scanning, but those results would be the same as I showed inside the console. Just in sake of time, I will just pretend that I don't want to accept anything that Prisma provided, and I will merge this code. And now what happens, because we also configured CI/CD integration between version control system and Prisma Cloud, there is a third place where we can scan this problem. Here is the result of this initial scan, which means that it is going to trigger CI/CD action workflow. And during the workflow, this is the third place where we can scan the same code that we are pushing. So as you can see, now we are at the stage where Prisma Cloud is scanning this code for the 3rd time. So if developers don't want to enforce the policies that we are pushing for Prisma Cloud inside the ID, or if somebody is not accepting those recommendations during the merging of the code into the main code, this is the 3rd place where we can do enforcement. And this is kind of the last part of my demo. Now I think it's natural transition to how to integrate further this with Terraform Cloud. So I think
Yeah,
that's it
definitely.
from my side.
before I hand over to Dylan, just a reminder for anybody in the audience, if you do have any questions, I've already got about 3 or 4. I've got about 3 or 4. So if you do have any questions, just pop them in the Q&A box, and I'll be asking that towards the end of the demos as well. So just a quick reminder there. But yeah, Dylan, over to you. Goran, if you could stop sharing. Yeah, perfect.
Excellent. Jack, I think you maybe wanted to cover something before I jump into the demo real quick.
Nah, I can save it for after.
Okay.
We're all
All
good.
right.
Yeah.
No worries. So similar to Goran here, I would like to show everyone just a quick slide. So this is the high level process that I was trying to describe before. So on the left-hand side here, we have our developers. They're using Terraform to deploy their infrastructure. They're probably pulling modules from a private module registry. Once a developer has kicked off a Terraform run, Terraform is going to generate a plan. And again, that plan is any new creation of any new resources or any changes to any resources that currently exist, and any deletions as well. What happens here is when that plan has been generated, a run task, which again is kind of like a stopping point during the provisioning process, will get kicked off. And that run task is a commercial only offering inside of Terraform. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but it does require Terraform Enterprise or HCP Terraform in order to use run tasks. So this run task is going to intercept the plan data. It's going to ship it off over to Prisma Cloud. Prisma Cloud is then going to look at that run data, look at all those changes, anything new, anything that's going to be deleted, and it's going to check it against the policies that we have chosen for this specific workspace inside of Terraform. You can get very granular with this. Like Jack had mentioned before, we have some CISOs or some security organizations that say one policy set everywhere all the time, and others may get a little bit more tactical with it and say this workspace is PCI compliant, this workspace is GDPR compliant, whatever that might be. You have that level of granularity. But once Prisma scans that information, it will send back either a pass or a fail, along with some relevant information of what may have failed, back to Terraform. And then we're going to show that directly inside of HCP Terraform. And I'm going to show you how you can get that messaging back to your developers so that they can see that during the run as well. I am not nearly as brave as Goran. I have been bit too many times by the demo deities, so my demo is recorded. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, I can see that. I can see that video.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm going to kind of pause through the video a little bit here just to kind of describe what we're doing. A little bit of this is a tour of HCP Terraform. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this because that's not what we're really trying to show, but it does help kind of piecing the puzzle pieces together. So when you first log into HCP Terraform, you get dropped into this projects screen. Projects, the best way to describe them, they're folders. They're just organizational tools inside of Terraform. What we care about really are what is inside of the projects, and those are our workspaces. So I'm going to click over to the workspaces here in just a moment. I have a ton in here, but the workspace that I really care about is one called TF Prisma Cloud. You can see this is already errored. That's because I was kicking off some runs with some bad code, and I was making sure that our integration was working. So inside of a workspace, inside of HCP Terraform, we get a bunch of information. And really what this is doing is it's storing our state file. If you're familiar with Terraform, that's something that you have to do when you really start to run Terraform as a team. So HCP Terraform handles that for you. We've got this workspace, which is going to essentially be a run inside of Terraform that is hooked up directly to a GitHub repo. I'm going to click on that here in just a moment. Inside of this repo, I have a bunch of different modules, a bunch of different workspaces that I'm using inside of HCP Terraform. There's a couple of other settings that we can set on the workspace. So the execution mode is remote here. This is kind of like a GitHub runner. So it's just some infrastructure that we have that's actually executing the Terraform run. You can set up different settings inside of the workspace to automatically apply new changes when there's merges into the main branch inside of GitHub. We have auto destroy triggers if you only want workspaces and infrastructure to live for a short amount of time. And then we also have drift detection, which if someone makes a change to the infrastructure outside of Terraform, we can be made aware of it and either rectify it or accept it as a valid change. We also have our outputs inside of here. I think I'm going to show the variables for the workspace next. So it's really just a quick tour of HCP Terraform and kind of how the entire SaaS solution makes it very, very easy to start consuming runs as a platform team. Okay. So from here, I'm going to kick off a new run inside of the workspace, and we are going to see this fail. Once this fails, we're going to get some relevant information as to why, right? What code did I write that wasn't good? Our plan has been created here. This is where it gets shipped off over to Prisma Cloud. They're going to do their scanning and then send us back some information. So we can see here that there are 3 resources that I'm creating. This deployment is very, very simple. It's just an EC2 instance with an EBS volume, so a virtual machine with some storage, and that storage is unencrypted. And that's what we're seeing here. AWS EBS volumes are not encrypted. We expand that out and we get a very verbose message that tells our developers exactly what you're doing wrong. Now, this information is directly inside of HCP Terraform during the run. To be very frank with you, this is not where developers live. They are not logging into HCP Terraform. They are staying inside of their IDE. They're staying inside of VS Code. So how do we get this message here directly to our developers so that they don't have to log in? We have something called a notification on the workspace, and we can create a notification that's either a webhook, an email, a Slack message, or something through Microsoft Teams that during a failed policy check, we will actually send that exact same message that you just saw either to a webhook, so like some sort of custom receiving system, an email, a Slack message, or something similar. So your developers don't have to log into Terraform the Cloud to get this. Again, we're looking to shift left and make it as easy as possible. Inside of here, I have pulled up VS Code, and I am using Prisma Cloud's application security plugin for VS Code. On the left-hand side of this screen here, you can see I have 2 resources that I'm creating, that virtual machine as well as that storage. And you can see that I have a couple of red X's along the side here. It's really simple for developers to get feedback when they're looking at their code directly inside of the IDE. All they have to do is hover over some of these red X's or the resource in question, and we will get that same information reflected directly in the IDE. You can't shift any further left than this. This is where they're writing the code. It'll tell you exactly what we need to do in order to fix it. That's great. That's awesome. What if we actually want to rectify the issue, right? Do we need to go in and start typing and making code changes? Not necessarily. Goran had showed you previously, you can do this directly from inside of Prisma Cloud. You can also fix these issues directly in the IDE just by clicking a button, and it changes our encrypted value from false to true. So I've pushed that new code up to my repo, which has initiated a new run inside of the workspace. And now we're going to see that all of this infrastructure, oh, my demo ended quick. All of this infrastructure has been provisioned appropriately. We get a green check mark, and now we can hit apply and get that compliant infrastructure out on the other side. And that is it for my quick down and dirty demo as well.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, Dylan. So I know that we've maybe dived into some of the demo piece. We've talked about some more of the integration piece. And Jack, this might be for you, or unless you've got a surprise for me, which Dylan kind of alluded to. How could I introduce my Prisma Cloud customers to Terraform?
Yeah, I think that it's probably, I think that Kurt, this actually ties really well together, is I think that one of the best references that we can give to this program for customers is that HashiCorp and Palo Alto actually use this integration ourselves. We actually built it for us first. So I think that's probably the best way to introduce it to your customers. So for your Prisma Cloud customers, you can tell them the story of Palo Alto first customer. So within Palo Alto, the team actually, like bless their hearts, has to deal with all the acquisitions that you guys do over at Palo Alto Networks. I think it's been 20 in the last 5 years. Actually, has been using Prisma Cloud for a long time, and actually is recently added Terraform, right? And what does that mean to them? So what first customer has done within Palo Alto is that they first shifted, right? So they found 135 policies that were the most common violations in their runtime across internal resources as well as their acquisitions. Over 60 million lines of code scanned to get to that point. And what they found is that for any new acquisition, so maybe look at Dig as a recent one or what's coming over with QRadar, is that they demand from day one is that, okay, developers over there, these are your policies that are zero tolerance effectively, enforce them. And what they found by actually taking those first 135 policies and actually enforcing them through Terraform is that they immediately, for their own infrastructure, when they rolled this out before, resolved 80,000 runtime risks. Like, I just want to say that one more time.
Wow.
80,000 runtime risks were just wiped off the board. And what that meant for the people, right, that were handling this is that they had a cloud security Hollywood alerts team, probably my favorite team name for a very stressful job. And Kurt, they were actually able to drop the number of team members on that for a global team from 13 down to 1. And what they've done there is that they've actually reallocated those headcount to actually start to take Prisma and then actually get ahead of the acquisitions that they brought in. So whether that's QRadar with IBM this year or whatever Palo Alto is planning next, I don't intend on trying to read the mind of Lee Claridge and they can just do what they want next. But they actually can now get ahead of their merger and acquisition strategy and actually start to inform developers before they come in of what policies and what they need to clean up. So that's, in my opinion, the best way to bring it to your Prisma Cloud customers. Like, hey, do you want to know who the owners and maintainers of Prisma Cloud are actually using this today? They're actually enforcing these policies through Terraform.
So then, Jack, I'll stick with you, and Dino, feel free to jump in here if you want. But so I'm on the other side of the fence. I've been working with Newaware before. I've got Terraform customers, but I want to start having a security conversation with them. How do I introduce them to Prisma Cloud?
Yeah, I mean, you can tell them that HashiCorp.
I'll let you go, then I'll come in on that comment.
Sounds good. I mean, Kurt, it's almost like the same thing because HashiCorp ourselves are actually Prisma Cloud customers. So the way that we've actually rolled this out internally is that, so we used to actually run separate sets of infrastructure for our different projects. So for the folks familiar to us, like Vault ran in parallel to Terraform, ran in parallel to Console and Packer. But what our new CISO has actually done is actually really unified the path to production, regardless of team and project. And so as part of that, just for the record here, like HashiCorp's own instance of Terraform does not execute a run, period, unless it is checked by Prisma. That is how we run our own infrastructure. So for the folks that are talking to Terraform users today, it's like, this is what we believe is the standard. And Kurt, we've actually taken this further, and for the sellers on the phone that are looking to bring this to customers, you can actually take it a step forward, is that we actually don't roll out a Packer image unless it is scanned before it is made available to developers by Prisma. So we've actually pushed Prisma as far left as possible, and that's what we believe in as a company. And so when we talk about like our customer advisory board for this partnership, not only is Armand Dagrar, our founder, on that, as well as Lee Claridge, but also our own teams internally, whether they're writing Console or Vault, they actually have a seat at the table because it's so important to their process as well. So I think that reference, Kurt, is probably the best one that we can give for a Terraform user. It's like, hey, the guys that actually wrote that product, this is how they use it.
Yeah, fair.
I'll just add to that, Kurt. So I think every great journey starts with one small step. Okay, so I would ask the people who are on the other side of the webinar here. Let's highlight some customers where they're looking for the kind of proposition and solution that we've spoken around today. If a customer's looking for that frictionless experience between security and the dev side, those reliable deployments, and most importantly from an organization is to be able to repeatable, secure deployments. Then let's highlight them with yourself, and working with ourselves in HashiCorp to mutually engage with them. There's various different resources you can offer, and I'm sure you're going to talk around them. and we've got all the demos, we've got all the referenceability, but let's highlight the customers that we can reach to go and help, and together go and help them.
Yeah, definitely, and I'll talk about that in a bit. I feel like we're conscious of time now. We do have a few questions that have come up, so I'm going to ask the question, and then I feel free to jump in here, guys. I think we'll kind of just go through it. So we've got we've got a couple here. So there is, what does the process to implement and adopt these policies via runtask look like? I think we've maybe seen some of that in a demo, but could you give me a quick high version of it?
Yeah. High level, we're generating a token from inside of Terraform. We're hooking that up into Prisma Cloud. Prisma Cloud's attaching to cloud accounts. And then after that, you are essentially picking the workspaces inside of Terraform that you want that run task to be enabled on. So it's quite literally like a drop-down menu, very, very simple to set up. And then adopting the policies is really more or less, we kind of talked about it a little bit. It's based on the organization. There's a lot of different ways to do it, starting off as advisory mode, letting those planes go on the air and then radioing back to the tower to let them know that, hey, the next plane needs to be built a little bit differently is more or less the kind of the standard that we recommend.
Perfect. And then how do I identify the relevant policies for my organization? That's another one that we've had.
Yeah, that one is really interesting. So if you are beholden to a compliance framework, it's very, very simple, right? Logging into Prisma, you can actually do a search for something like GDPR, and that will pull up a list of a couple hundred of different policies. You can further break it down from there. So if you know you're an AWS only shop or your customer is, you can just say, show me GDPR policies for AWS. 52 policies or something like that will show up, and it's really simple to just enable those. And again, you can get very tactical with this. So if it's, Sarbanes-Oxley for one workspace, PCI for another, you can get that that level of granularity based on the workspace and on the enforcement level as well.
Yeah, perfect. I think we've got a minute left, so I'm just gonna finish it there. Just give me 2 seconds, guys.
Yeah.
So obviously, to support our partners, and NewAware really, but we're working with Prisma Cloud and obviously HashiCorp as well. To support our partners, with introducing this solution to their customers, we've worked with both of them to create a campaign in a box. So that campaign in a box is your marketing piece. It's covering your email sequencing, call outreach, as well as a customizable one-pager around the solution piece that our partners can brand. You can reach out to your NewAware or Exclusive Networks representative, or if you're already working with Prisma Cloud or already working with HashiCorp, happy to have that conversation with them as well. We will be following up with all of the attendees around the campaign in a box and how we can reach their own customers, as well as pricing, deal registers, all of the kind of typical things. Those will kind of be discussed partner to partner. But I really want to thank everybody that joined today, as well as all of our speakers. Unless there's anything that you guys would ask, anything that you've got specifically. Okay, I can see.
I just want to say thank you, Kurt, and the team for NewAware for putting this on, and thanks to the HashiCorp colleagues. Let's see if we can help our partners, help our customers.
Yeah, I can see that Goran's answering it around the Sentinel-1 piece, around the Sentinel piece.
Maybe it's easier just to answer it live. So the question was about customers that are using Sentinel. Does this replace it? No, this is addition. So it can be nicely combined. This is the first question. And second question was if there is additional integration between Prisma Cloud and HashiCorp. Yes, with Vault Security. We didn't cover this one, but there is a product, Vault Security, very popular also from HashiCorp side. There is a way to integrate with specifically how to inject secrets during the runtime in containers. But yeah, there is a very nice documentation out there because we don't have a time. But if you want, you can leave your details and we are happy to reach out to you and provide more information. So those are the two questions. Hopefully it's clear. And yeah, thank you very much, especially our colleagues from HashiCorp and Noaware. Appreciate your time in organizing this good discussion session. Thank you.
Of course, and thank you for everybody joining. Thank you.